Chapter 30. Marcos gently slid onto my bed and lay his heavy body on top of mine, and I quickly found myself engulfed within his stifling scent once more, sending my senses into a wild frenzy, and my head arching back in euphoric bliss. With a gaze sharper than steel, his unwavering eyes watched my face as he slowly thrust his tongue deep into my mouth, tasting my insolent sexual angst, desperate for annihilation. And with slight force, I felt that stiff rod of flesh push hungrily through my gold caftan and in between my slipping thighs. I moaned through a devastated breath, dying. Marcos Almeida was again slowly killing me. Eventually, he drew himself away from my impatient lips and, lifting my arms above my head, pulled that pretty caftan away from my body, exposing my anxious nakedness. As he came back down on top of me, pressing himself against my perky skin, the look in his dark eyes revealed to me that he meant business. I knew from that one look alone that Marcos did not do things half-heartedly, especially when it came to the bedroom. I knew he was going to tear me apart. He gently yanked my head to the side, and I felt his hot tongue squish down inside my ear, licking eagerly, making me squirm with uncomfortable pleasure. I know your secrets, Bonnet. I was barely conscious. His commanding hands continued to clench tightly through my long black hair until they ran down the sides of my slender body, clutching my knees, slowly spreading my thighs wide apart. Oh, God. Through my panting breaths, I watched as those dark, tormenting eyes became magnetized toward my warm, dripping sex. Cradling my pelvis within his spectacular arms, Marcos rubbed his soft, sensual lips all over my wetness, bathing his face in it, sucking within the deepest crevices of my loneliness, and satiating my desperation for his love. And just like last night, I hopelessly surrendered to his fervent lust, feeling it defeat every cell within me as my body succumbed to the rhythmic motion of his wild, passionate tongue. I was imploding on the fringe of an uncontrollable orgasm. And just before it hit me, Marcos pulled himself up onto me, my moist thighs being greeted by that now fully erect, bulging rod of flesh, forcing its way down into my carnal furnace. Destruction. Looking at me, Marcos rubbed that stiff flesh onto my delicate lips, only to seconds later greedily slip it into the impossibly tight walls of my sex. We both moaned loudly as he pushed it through with that slow, controlled urgency, forcefully prying it into my hot tunnel of wanton desire. He then pulled it out and thrust it in again, in and out, primal, instinctual. I was losing my mind. Somehow, we slid off the bed and onto the floor within our clandestine encounter. Yet still, Marcos maintained impressive vigor, his massive rod of flesh thrashing faster and faster inside of me. Tears began to flow from my agonized eyes, running down the sides of my face as I glanced out at the bed of scarlet roses drenched in the soft moonlight, swaying gently in the high night winds, silently bearing witness to our passionately debauched amalgamation. My pleading became louder and louder, and those haunting eyes continued to watch me through the darkness incessantly, watching my body begin to violently shake out of control, on the verge of a heart-stopping climax. My trembling was inconsolable, and Marcos knew I was about to hit the ultimate zenith. He immediately thrust his tongue deep into my throat, drowning out my crippling screams that no doubt would have woken up the dead, or even worse, April. And then it happened. Digging my nails into his back until I pierced his skin, my heart stopped, utterly surrendering to supreme rhapsody. The veins burst angrily out of my neck with each thrust Marcos ruined me with, until my body spasmodically gushed all over him, all over me, flooding my floor of promiscuity. Relentless, like the beast he was, he slapped his bulging rod of angry flesh through my wetness, sliding around in it with certain direction, totally obliterating my insides until I felt yet another explosion within the walls of my sex. He too, losing himself and joining me over that unspeakable abyss of ecstasy. Breathless, we lay there, the night wind delicately dancing around our lifeless bodies, our hearts furiously pounding against the other, finding ourselves lost within that lustful, indescribable realm of pleasure, void of time and space. Drawing myself slowly back into the present, my glassy eyes fell over the bed of scarlet roses again, watching as they gently moved through the caressing winds. If only you could talk. Marcos finally wrested himself away from my defeated body, pulling his deflated flesh out of my violated sacredness, and stood up in the soft moonlight, dripping wet. Wow. I glanced at him enveloped within a regal ambience. Marcos Almeida, sex lord. God damn. Smiling, he gave me his hands and helped me from the floor, walking me to the shower. As the steam poured from the gold faucets, he cradled me with his big arms, the hot water washing away the fragile evidence of our sensual dalliance. We toweled each other off, and without any words, slipped back into the comforts of my bed. Cooking? Forget it. We lay within our delirium, Marcus's body slumped lazily over mine, gazing out beyond the gardens, captivated by the moonlight dancing along the dark ocean horizon over Santa Barbara. My iPod on shuffle quietly filled the room with a change of music. Caravan Planet. Right on cue, he murmured, resting his head on my jugular breasts. Can't believe you listen to Sabbath. Believe it, baby, I grinned, holding his head in the palm of my hand, stroking my fingers through his damp hair. I'm sure I was a child of the 70s. One of those topless ones, no doubt, Marcus muttered. Most probably. We shared a soft silence, listening as Ozzy's voice filled the air, drifting out through the jasmine vine and floating down the side of the mountain. I watched our chests slowly rise and fall in hypnotic unison until I noticed Marcus gently slipping into a deep and heavy slumber. I carefully glanced down at his eyelids, scattered with those long black lashes. He was gone. Finally, the man sleeps. It wasn't long thereafter that I too could no longer resist the pangs of the astral worlds, pulling me away from the dream that I lay in and taking me into another. It was the most beautiful night of my entire life. Chapter 31. My bleary eyes opened through the gentle wind sweeping through my bedroom. I put my hand over my eyes, shielding the early morning sun spilling through my sensitive pupils. I glanced down at that wet patch of erotica that had soaked into the carpet. About last night. Marcus. I quickly rolled over, and he was gone. Already. Stretching over to grab my iPhone on the other side of the bed, I felt something razor-sharp prick into my back. I cringed in pain, quickly scampering off the blankets. I got up and noticed a scarlet rose picked from the garden, lying squashed on my white bedsheets. Marcus, I gasped, feeling a smile melt across my lips. So romantic. This guy was making me sick with love. I sighed happily, staring up at the ceiling as the fresh memories of last night began to saturate my mind. I peered down at that wet patch on the carpet again. Beyond words, Marcus Almeida. Sniffed the wilted rose and hid it under my pillow. I would never part with it. Wobbling through my internal stiffness, I looked at the clock. 7:50 a.m. Shit. I quickly threw some clothes on and poured myself a fennel seed cup of tea, scanning through the flood of emails in April's inbox. Already overreading them after 30 seconds, I quickly brushed my hair and smeared some lip gloss over my exhausted, dry lips. Shutting the remnants of last night behind the doors of my quarters, I crawled up through the dewy garden and entered the house, seeing Lydia trying helplessly to get Henry ready for school. "Morning, guys," I said, walking into the kitchen. Poor Lydia. It was only Monday and she already looked tired. "Morning, Miss Bunny." "Oh, Bunny, I don't want to go to school." Henry whined, sitting at the kitchen counter. "You tell me this every morning, Henry," I replied, raising a dubious eyebrow. "Yeah, but this morning I'm really sick. I really am," he answered, clutching his iPad. It never strayed too far from his breakfast bowl. "I'm not kidding. No doubt you were up all hours playing World of Warcraft." "I was asleep by 9, Henry protested unconvincingly. Lydia and I shared a disapproving glance. "Look, we'll call into Starbucks," I bribed, taking the keys for April's black range. He glanced at me, won over immediately. "Okay, works every time." My mind was clouded throughout the whole drive, wondering how the morning would unfold. As far as I knew, Marcus was still home. All the cars were still at the house, and that God-forsaken helicopter hadn't moved. I drove up into the school parking lot and got out with my coffee. I quickly glimpsed Brianna driving up in her black Range, parking a few cars down with her daughter Belle, who was in the same class as Henry. She spotted me and waved me down. She was one hot mama. "Oh, hey, Bonnie," she grinned, climbing out of her car, donning some long black training pants with a white skivvy, conservatively revealing her great body. She looked fresh for a Monday morning, with her sandy blonde hair tied back in a loose ponytail, sporting some gold hoop earrings. Wish I could have said the same for me. Brianna was immensely popular with the other mothers at Laguna Blanca, and although she had some serious loot with a house on the beach in Carpinteria, she had a heart of gold and was one of the most genuine people I had met in Santa Barbara. "Hey, Brianna," I waved, watching as Belle and Henry walked off to school together. "How are you?" "Oh, fine, honey," she smiled, giving me a kiss. Brianna looked as though she was ready for some exercise on the beach, and she did this every day with her massive Great Dane. Her discipline was envious. We often made small talk when we bumped into each other every now and then. "So, how's things with April?" she asked, her cobalt blue eyes lined with a hint of mascara. Stunning, as always. Heard she had fun on the weekend. Word travels like fire around Santa Barbara. "She did," I smirked, "but she's paying for it." "That's too bad," Brianna laughed. "She's thoroughly entertaining, though. I've seen her at a couple of parties around town. She's a good time. How are you settling in?" I immediately thought of Marcos. Yeah, things are great," I replied politely. "They're great people to work for. Very generous." "Oh, they're known for their philanthropy," she nodded. "Can't believe Marcos donated $15 million to that charity last year. That, medical... She frowned, trying to recall the name. "Oh, Médecins Sans Frontières. Ah, yes, that's right." She nodded quickly. Unbelievable. It was unbelievable, because Marcos is fucking unbelievable. The donation had nothing to do with April, I might add. "Hard to believe there are people like that in the world," I said, glancing through the trees as the morning sun shone against the admin building. "In this day and age, absolutely," Brianna agreed. "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I have some more of that rolled jasmine tea from China," she said quickly as she remembered. "I made a huge order, and I know how you love your exotic teas, so I thought you might like some." "Oh, how thoughtful," I exclaimed. "I would love some of that. Thank you." It was true. I had a penchant for delicious herbal and floral teas, and I found that I shared this love for tea with Brianna. "So why don't you come around for a cuppa and we'll try some of it later? If you're not busy, that is." "Sure. I could probably get away after 11, I suggested. "I've got some paperwork to send off for April." You know where I live, right? Yeah. April already has your address in her GPS. Nothing like being super organized. I'll see you later then, I said, waving goodbye. Later, honey, Brianna called, climbing into her car and driving off. Chapter 32. It was almost 9 a.m., and I was psyching myself up to go into the house for breakfast. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous, because I was. Not so much about seeing Marcos, but seeing April. Did I feel any guilt for having the most incredible sex of my life with her husband? Not 1 ounce. But being the particular woman that April is, perhaps she's capable of smelling the freshness of our lurid midnight encounter. Or perhaps she would smell my scent still lingering on her husband's velvet skin. Some women have that extrasensory ability, and I was hoping she didn't. Morning, Bon, Dave chimed, preoccupied with doing a stocktake of the mammoth amounts of food throughout the pantry. Morning, Dave. Taking a deep breath, I walked through the kitchen and into the atrium, seeing Marcos, April, and Terry Harriet, one of the best architects in California. Oh, I felt immediate relief wash over me because Terry was just the distraction I needed for April this morning. Oh, good morning, honey, April smiled in a chirpy mood. Glad you got it together this morning, lady. Marcos glanced at me with those dark eyes, as warm as butter, looking more relaxed than I've ever seen him. I shuddered, having a quick flashback. Morning, Bonnie, he said quietly. I smiled. Good morning, everyone. Bonnie? Terry began suspiciously, rubbing his brown mustache. Did I see you speeding past me in your Mercedes this morning on Coast Village? I laughed, taking my seat in the glorious sunshine beside Marcos. Wasn't me this morning, Terry, I replied, furrowing a brow. I was in the range. Oh, I could have sworn it was you, he objected, pointing his finger at me, his balding head glistening in the sunlight. Someone else, Terry, I chuckled, shaking my head. You know everyone in Santa Barbara anyway. Could have been Anna DeFranco, he surmised, holding his finger to his lips. She drives a black G-Class. Have you seen her drive? He shot April his condemning eyes. Drives like a psycho on steroids. Terry was louder than life itself. His style was over the top. His house designs were over the top. And even that mustache of his was over the top. As he and April began going over some interior concepts for yet another Almeida house, this one being in Hawaii, I took a cup and poured myself some tea, generously helping myself to some passion fruit and melon from the exquisite platter laid out across the table. I was ravenous. Who could blame me after last night? Inhaling deeply, I got a whiff of Marcus's cologne through my nostrils. It immediately shattered the front I had going on with April, and quickly dragged me back into last night's magnificent debauchery. I felt my palms become clammy as the thick, unspoken ambience shared between Marcus and I stifled the air. How the other two morons sitting across from us didn't pick up on it was beyond me. My stomach grew weak, listening to his slow, deep breathing as he held the newspaper in front of his face, sipping his black coffee and totally ignoring me. I actually like the paisley print for the cushions better than the stripe. I vaguely heard April consorting with Terry. Everything was turning into a mad blur. Suddenly, under the heavy white tablecloth, I felt a warm foot slide on top of my red-painted toes, nestled within my pair of black lace Louboutin flats. Marcos, you are destroying me. My voracious appetite swiftly diminished and my mouth grew dry. I could feel my body becoming undone once more, unable to resist his impetuous temptations. I carefully sipped my tea, sitting there pretending to be engaged in April and Terry's ridiculous conversation. And as I pretended, I delicately slipped my foot out of my shoe and rubbed it against his. I could barely glance at him from the corner of my eye, but as he turned the page of the Financial Review, he began stroking my foot more passionately, more intensely, as if our feet were in a dovetail of lovemaking. It was crazy. But as unnerving and as risky as it was, I couldn't stop for the life of me. His mere touch was doing things to me again. Oh, Jesus Christ. My eyelashes began batting wildly, and my insides quickly moistened as those nasty images of him thrusting himself into me shamelessly flooded my mind again. Marcos knew I was flustered, but only because he was the master of body language. "Barney, what do you think, honey?" April said, holding up some expensive fabric swatches, rudely tearing me out of my erotic funk. I'm feeling the paisley, April." I nodded. "I'm feeling a fucking lot more than that right now." Marcus slightly snickered under his breath, pretending to look interested in his newspaper. "Oh, you're enjoying this, aren't you?" It was blatantly obvious. Marcos was the connoisseur of suave. Nothing fazed him, not even slightly. Here was his wife, sitting just a yard or so across from him, and here he was, stroking my trembling foot with his, under the tablecloth. He was slowly unraveling my heartfelt anguish again, and I knew he had to be feeling it. I'm surprised April and Terry hadn't either. I quickly learned that Marcos Almeida was a man of flawless public constraint, the perfect teacher. "Honey, can you send an email with the name of this swatch to Kelsey later this morning?" April glanced at me, sipping her tea. "She'll print them off for Terry." "Sure," I smiled, trying to suppress the burn I was feeling all over my face. Much to my own relief, Marcus eventually pulled his foot away, and just like that, the inconspicuous serenade was over. I was finally able to calm down. "I've got to get ready," he muttered, quietly looking at April and folding the newspaper. "Oh no, get ready? What for? Where are you going now?" April smiled up at him. "All right, honey." My desperate eyes pleaded with him as we quickly exchanged a glance. Terry looked up at Marcus's gorgeousness and pushed his glasses back up on his nose. "Rick and I are having that dinner on Friday night at Lucky's," he said. "Are the two of you going to join us?" "Yes, I think so," April nodded at Marcos, waiting for his approval. Marcus nodded. "We'll be there, Terry." "All right then," he smiled. "We'll have a great trip and see you on Friday night." Even the gay guys loved him. Marcos quietly rose from the table, shoving the newspaper under his arm. I noticed he was wearing his usual black sweats and tee, the ones I'm sure he wore with me last night. I hope so anyway. Giving me a subtle wink, he walked out of the atrium, snatching my heart and taking it with him. I sat there at the table, drained and empty, picking at the pretty fruit down on my plate. Fuck. I had to get away from everyone. I'll be in the office if you need me, April. No problem, Ban, she replied, looking up from her swatches. Good seeing you, Terry. I'll watch out for you on the road. Ha ha, he bellowed. I'm sure you'll be seeing me before I'll be seeing you. He made me laugh. Crazy man.